Many of the witnesses to the March 13th event described a V formation of 5 lights with 2 lights trailing. In fact, there were a couple of witnesses that described the 2 lights docking and undocking onto the array of 5 lights. Now here we have in Dr. Kitai's photographs a full 2 months before the Phoenix sighting, we have 5 lights in a V formation and 2 trailing lights. So obviously this object was around for a long time before then, just something made it decide that it was going to fly over the entire state on the night of March 13th.
We could not see the whole object from front to back, from side to side. It was so big.
I would gauge this object to be several football fields. I mean, like a mile, maybe more than a mile, maybe even 2 miles. It was huge.
And it just kept going over our heads and going and going and going. And it seemed like we could actually just reach up and touch it. It was so low.
I like to use the old peace sign, stretch it out. But it was something like this. And as it passed, all we could really see was the left wing of the craft as it passed in front of us. That was how low it was as it passed. And as it started to pass in front of us, I put my hand up to where the nose of the craft was, and I took my other arm out to where the end of the wing was, and it was well over 30 inches. And I said to my wife at the time, I said, that's a mile long.
The lights did not move relative to each other. Had they been in a formation of separate aircraft, there would have been a slight relative movement, I would have perceived, and they stayed pretty much just locked in position. So I'm pretty sure it was a single aircraft, wider than any other aircraft flying today.
It was quite obvious to me this was not a conventional aircraft.
As the craft flew overhead, the lights resembled can lights like you see in the ceiling, so fairly defined as circles in this V-shaped formation, but no harsh glare to them.
What struck me was the sheer size of these lights.
It was an orangish amber light, and it was so rich and lustrous, it's almost as if the objects seemed to be comprised of the light itself, which is strange. But imagine if you could, that light would have material property, the physical property. It was almost as if the orb was crafted out of light. They are absolutely perfect in every aspect of every geometrical aspect that could be observed. They were perfectly, uniformly round. They were perfectly, uniformly equidistant.
Video doesn't do it justice. In real life, they're huge. They're amber. There's no flaring. They're like a ball. On the video, they flicker, they're white, they're much smaller. But nonetheless, the formations themselves are compelling.
When it got directly over my head, and I mean, I'm talking dead center here, I was right underneath this thing. And I look up. It was like there was no filament in this thing. They appear to be in a canister. There was light swimming around in this shape or form.
They didn't glare. They did not emit like a beam, like a floodlight, like landing aircraft lamp. There seemed to be some depth to them.
I noticed it was a triangle shaped, 3 huge lights. And they weren't beaming down like landing lights. They were just big balls of light, but very pretty.
They blocked out the stars as they moved. You could not see objects beyond them as they would pass in front of them.
In between these lights, though, it did seem somewhat denser. It seemed darker, like there was a shape or form going on there that was holding these things together.
It was like looking through water. And if you've ever seen that little wavy motion and so forth, that's what that's like.
What absolutely struck me as being eerie beyond belief, the immense size of this thing would have to be controlled by something that had a pretty strong engine just to sustain flight. There was not a buzz, there was not a hum, there was not a jet engine, there was not a prop engine, there was not a jet prop engine. There was absolutely no sound at all.
Just 3 beautiful lights coming towards us. And it seemed to move effortlessly, just glided right over.
This was one solid object, one craft, one big, large boomerang.
Everybody that called me said the same thing. It was huge, It was slow. It was low. It was totally silent. They could see some lights, somewhere between 5 and 9 lights on it at any given time. The lights were not like spotlights. They were more like glowing gaseous globes.